You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode, I spoke with Debra Levy, an ADHD coach in private practice. We discussed her career journey, specifically her segue from being a personal organizer to becoming an ADHD coach, helping her clients feel better about themselves through healthier self-talk and through experiencing success, why she enjoys working with individuals with ADHD, how she helps her clients create order and address procrastination and overwhelm, as well as helping them manage time more effectively, the value of family members understanding ADHD better, and a lot more. Before we dive in, I'd like to tell you about another podcast I listen to called the Chinuch Today Podcast. The host of the Chinuch Today Podcast is former ADHD Heroes podcast guest Rabbi Yerachmiel Garfield, Menahel of Yeshiva Torah Emes of Houston, Texas. Rabbi Garfield interviews a wide range of creative thinkers who are already implementing their valuable innovations in the world of education. So whether you're a principal looking for new ideas to implement broadly, a classroom educator looking for inspiration, or a caring parent looking for hope through what is coming down the pipeline, the Chinuch Today podcast may be for you. So go check that out on your favorite podcast platform. Also, Rabbi Garfield has just come out with a new book called When They Were Young, with inspiring stories from the younger years of great rabbinic giants and what we can learn from them. There will be a link to both of those in the show notes. And now, on to the regular episode. Enjoy! Debra Levy, welcome to the ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Same here. Glad to be here.
Okay, great. So a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I've had an interesting journey. I started out with a career in interior design and worked in Manhattan and in London, where my husband and I lived for a couple of years, and then came back and started my own photography company, doing natural portraits for kids. And then I decided along the way to become a professional organizer. I just felt like that was something that was a calling for me. And then along the way during that, I discovered a training program for organizers that dealt with the coaching aspect and making sure that we were not just dealing with stuff, but really getting into what was going on for our clients and really going deeper. But I knew right away when I started this training program that this was going to be something that I wanted to do full on at some point and convert completely over to coaching. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up becoming a coach with my niche being working with ADHD and executive function the challenges for people. And I've been loving it ever since.
Interesting. How did the coaching go from coaching to ADHD coaching? Was that direct?
It was pretty organic because what was happening along the way with my organizing is that I was really deep in the home and environment of everybody. And I'd say 90 to 95% of my clientele had either been diagnosed or not with ADHD or executive function challenges. And I just felt that I just loved working with that population, and it just was a natural connection for me. And when I started my coaching training, a lot of it had to do with dealing with neurodiverse people. And it just felt really, really natural along the way to just kind of start working specifically with that clientele.
What was the piece of the coaching that you liked over the organizing?
Well, the organizing was more the physical stuff. The coaching really got into, what was really going on for this client. It wasn't just setting up systems, which is, being able to have things accessible and creating an environment that was more peaceful and stuff. It was really getting into what was happening, that there was such disorder going on for the client. And that had a lot to do with the ADHD challenges they were facing, time management, being able to be organized, being able to plan and prioritize and so forth. So I just felt like it was, instead of just dealing with the surface part, it was really getting to who they were and how they felt about themselves too. Because for most of my clients, they were always telling themselves how lazy they were, how unorganized they were, how disheveled and disordered they were, whether it was internally or externally, with negative self-talk or people that they were telling them were their family all their lives. And I just really wanted to be able to help them realize that they weren't broken, that they just needed things to kind of form in their life and support them in a way that was for them, and not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
That's interesting. Did you achieve that by addressing the self-talk, like CBT style, or more just by giving them an opportunity to succeed, or maybe both?
I think it's both. I think when it comes to the self-talk, what I would say to them sometimes is, if you were trying to really inspire or encourage a family member or a friend to be able to do something, in what way would you do it? And, they would often say, I tell them how great they were, and how much, they have the ability to do this. And I said, well, why are you any different?
Right.
You know, why would you, do you think that, like talking down to them and being negative would in any way encourage them? And, a lot of times when I would say that, all of a sudden they were able to kind of just like step back for a moment. And even though they knew it was going to be hard, they started to kind of replace some of that negative self-talk with, I can do this. I am able to do this. And it was really very transformational in that respect. Um, and then, like there were other aspects too that just really helped them to kind of see themselves in a different way.
Right. That flip of a switch is really incredible. That paradigm shift. I imagine you had to do something to maintain it. What did that look like?
Well, as we went along in our sessions, I would start to hear whether the phrasing about themselves was still the same as before, if it started to change. And, and we discussed, it's not something that can happen overnight where they make these changes.
Sure.
They've been talking like that about themselves for all their lives,
Sure.
So
Right.
I just mentioned that it would, like sometimes we would just tweak it a little bit, or maybe the phrase would change a little bit what they were going to say. But they realized, just with anything that we were working on, it was going to take some practice. Um, like if they're how many hours old, thousands of hours old, like, 1 hour is not going to change something. So it takes work in between the sessions to be able to address something that is so hard and challenging for them. And most of the times they did it.
That's amazing. You give them homework to do in that realm of self-talk?
Yeah. Anytime there's some actions that are looked at the end of a session, it's always guided by them of what they feel they're capable of doing.
Right.
For some clients, they didn't even want to start that initially. It was just too far into them. But then when they just were, I said, okay, well, what about just being aware of when you're having some self-negative talk? And that just really opened their eyes, because it was most of the time. And once they were aware, they were really then able to just be ready to start to address it. And that even led to them understanding what was happening when they had a spouse or a family member start talking to them that way. And at that point, we started talking about, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you start communicating about, what do you need in order to move forward? And that really opened up a lot of different type of conversations, and helped them to move forward in that way too.
That's incredible. How much time would you say it took until you saw significant change in that realm? I assume it varies from client to client, but generally speaking.
Yeah, it really varied. Sometimes people could see a change right away with the next conversation they had. Even if it was a little amount, because what I would do at the beginning of every session we'd have, is to talk about what wins they had for the week.
Right.
So, and sometimes the win was just about them saying, I didn't react when my spouse said such and such about me, because
Right.
I knew that that was an external voice coming, and that didn't mean that that had to reflect how I was feeling. Like, what a win for someone who's
Yeah.
been dealing with that all the time. Sometimes it took a number of weeks for them to keep telling themselves that, because then their perspective about themselves started to change, and that they realized that, like they said, they weren't broken. They thought and felt differently than some of the neurotypical people that were in their lives or in their work, their home. But it does take work to make these changes, and we always talk about, like, not running up that mountain. It's got to be something that you keep plugging away at in order to really, like change, like that analogy about a sled going down a hill. where there's this trough that's created when you have the same thing going over and over and over again. If you want to go and change that, and make that neural pathway change, and you're doing a different habit. I think it was in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, where he talks about you have to put a big piece of plywood in front of that sled in order to make that change. So that sled for that plywood for them would sometimes just be that pronouncement to themselves that they were going to stop saying that to themselves. And then eventually that sled started going off and veering in a new way and neural pathway, and it started to make a change.
Well, really incredible. Shifting over a little bit, what element of this particular population have you found appealing to work with? It sounds like you gravitated towards very much.
Yeah. I mean, this is a generalization, but I'd say a, a great majority of my clients are big picture thinkers, and they have a lot of gratitude for things that, when people understand them, and they're really good with being empathetic and connecting a lot of times. And just that combination, and like the joy and feeling like that they've accomplished something is just so incredible to see and work with. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, those are often a fun side of the ADHD personality.
Oh,
The,
yeah. Yeah.
the creativity, the warmth, the
Right.
exuberance.
Yeah. And just trying new things, like once they see that this is just experimenting. It's a safe place, non-judgmental when we're working together to just try something new. And there's so many planners and time management systems and organization systems out there, but I say, look, all we're doing is just seeing like who you are and what's going to fit you. So that way they kind of let go a little bit, they loosen up a little bit, they realize if it's not right for them, it's not a mistake on their part, there's nothing wrong with them, it means it's not the right fit.
Yeah, I like to say that I don't end up with the same planning system for any two clients because everyone thinks so differently, and it really needs to speak to them, like you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? But there's so much out there that they're like, this is the right one for you, and do this. It's like, no, you got to stop listening to all that noise out there and just listen to yourself. Learn how to listen to yourself. That's probably the biggest thing that I want them to take away.
That's incredible. That's very valuable thing for them to start with.
Yeah.
What was the skill set you were bringing from organization to coaching? Did you have to learn a whole new skill set, or were you bringing swinging some skills over from one to the other?
Well, some of the things I brought over was how to create order. I could see that the thing that comes natural to me, and that's why interior design was a good fit. Creating order within a blank space, right? And then organizing, creating order within a home. And now we're looking at creating order in thoughts, like order in the mind, being able to sort things out and not make it feel so overwhelming, because a lot of times my clients would come with just everything in a jumble, and it's like almost like pulling out the knots, like loosening all the knots up. So I'd say that was something that was inherent along the way. But what I really had to learn was how to hold back the expert, because as a professional organizer, I'm coming in with solutions. I'm
Right,
helping them like this will, I mean, I'd always offer choices because I, want to make sure that it's not one size fits all for organizing either. But when I would say, uh, you know, here, this might be a really great solution for you. As you know, with coaching, we're not there to provide the answers. And I had great coach training and a lot of the emphasis, because it was really geared towards professional organizers, even though it's an ICF accredited program.
right,
They really helped us to hold back the expert. And that took a lot, because even though I might be able to see clearly and connect dots more,
right,
I can't do that for them. That's the whole beauty of coaching, when they learn how to do it for themselves.
right. Sure. So if we're looking at the disorganization of the ADHD brain, um, what has that looked like when you walk in? I guess I'm asking so that listeners can hear, your description of what you're seeing.
Well, when we first start out, I can tell when there's overwhelm in whatever area they're working on. And the first thing that we really try to do is to figure out what's the best way for them to get everything out of their head, into something. whether it's something digital or paper or both, or, or speak it into, WhatsApp message themselves. Like there's so much going on in the brain that they can't really see exactly what they need to work on. So once that's kind of dumped out, like a brain dump, then we can start to see like what, how is this really going to be naturally be sorted? And that's where the organizing aspect comes in this as well. Like, are these like, let's say if we're talking about a to-do list, things that are going on or projects and so forth, just to, we work together to see, where does this fall? Is this within general, general things like family? Is this regarding work? Is this regarding something you want to do for self-care and so forth? So that we kind of see what falls naturally in the categories that they come up with. And then we start to get into a little bit deeper to see how does that get sorted out even more? Because the more they could clearly see how things fall in their life or how they want it to fall, it becomes less overwhelming. And it helps them to kind of then be able to create next steps, because we work a lot on how to define that. Because there's so much that happens with procrastination, a lot of
Right.
times with people with ADHD, right? That a lot of times because it's just too overwhelming and too big. So really, let's break it down into manageable pieces. Or is it they just don't know some information, they need to get it? Or what's the very first step, because you don't have that information and you just need to then know how to move on. So I really try to help them to get it all out of their head, get it into a more organized format for themselves, and then they could actually see it visually, in whatever format we're working, so that it starts to become clearer and clearer and less overwhelming.
So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is they come in with a lot of overwhelm. You identify that the different thoughts going in their head can range from work related, home related, family related, self care related, and in their head it's a jumble of things that need to happen. Usually that feel like they're knocking on the door a little too hard, all at the same time. What sounds like what you first do is help them dump all those thoughts out into something, in some sense, some place to hold them, and then organize them, like you'd organize a space.
Yeah. Yeah, very similar. Very similar. When I used to organize, let's say, a garage, we would just do a general sort of tools, sports equipment, food items, whatever it might be. And then you go through those different buckets and see, what's needed. Same thing in their lives. Like, do they actually need this? Can they delegate it to someone else? Can they just throw it out? Can they, recycle it somewhere else? Does it go somewhere else? It's very, very similar, but it's, we're not talking about a house in someone's head. It's just that the system is very similar in terms of organizing stuff. And once you see what you have, then you can start to deal with it.
So what do the next steps of the process look like?
So a lot of it has to do with time management and how they feel like they're not getting enough done. They're too overwhelmed. They don't do things in the proper way and so forth. So we start to look at what's really important to them. Make sure that what's on their plate is meeting their values. I was just working with a client who she came to me completely overwhelmed, and she just felt like she could never get everything done. And it turns out that the job she was in was really not a match anymore for what she was doing. So she wanted to do one-on-one contact with people, and she was really, really good at that empathetic person that wants to just reach out. They were giving her things to like coordinate events. She was like a party planner, which was so far from what she could do. And she hated big events. She hated going to big events. She didn't like the details, because a lot of people with ADHD challenge, they're challenged with details, right?
Right, sure.
So she just all of a sudden she realized she doesn't have to say yes to those things all the time. If there are other people around, she can say yes to the things that are going to be tapping in on her inner strengths. So a lot of what we do at first is like, see what's the match, what's happening here with some of these things on your plate. Everything's not a fire that has to be put out, which many people perceive right away, like unless there's a deadline, right up there, everything's a fire. It's like what's not needed in your life anymore. And once that kind of gets funneled out of there, you could see like, how do you prioritize then? Because a lot of my clients will feel like everything's the same, that all
Right.
has the same priority. But we start to look at like, well, you know, is there a deadline for something? So we know that's an automatic, you have to create some milestones for that. Is there something that is something that you want to do, but you never get to do? So once we start to figure out what's important, we look at a visual calendar together and we start to see what might be anchors in their day that need to be in place so that they have some type of a structure, but that's not too constrictive, because a lot of people do not like that, right? They like that flexibility. But morning routines, what do you want your morning routine to be like? What do you want your nighttime routine to be like? When do you want to make sure that you have some nutrition and a little bit of exercise in the day, in the middle of the day? Once we start to see like where those big rocks go in, like that, the analogy of the rocks in the jars, you need to put the rocks in first, then put the pebbles, and then the sand. You can't do the other way around because you can't fit the rocks in.
Right.
We start to see like what's left in there and how can we best look at what you have left. Um, the next part is like learning how to estimate time well, because many people are very off on that and they have the time blindness and not understand how long things. So we delve into a lot of that as well.
And what does that what does that process look like? The learning about time.
So let's say if I find out that they really feel that they're pretty off regarding that, one of the actions they might take in between sessions is to just experiment and see morning routine. To take a guess at how long you think different aspects are going to take, and then actually time it. And I'll tell you, they are so shocked sometimes, shocked that some things they knew really well and some things they really were so off on. So by taking a look at that and being aware of it, they start to realize, how long things might possibly take. I also talked to them about the concept of ramping up and ramping down from a task or an errand, and how if you don't allow the time before you're doing something, like let's say you go food shopping and you allocate an hour, but and you have other things that you're planning in between, afterwards, before, but maybe 15 minutes before, you need to get your reusable bags out. You need to get your list of stuff and find it, what you do, or coupons if you clip them. And then maybe you had to go to the car and then run back to the house because you forgot something. So you got 15 minutes ramping up. The 15 minutes ramping down, if you want to completely complete it before you run off to something else, you got to unload your groceries and put them all the way away in the cabinets, put the bags back by the door, be able to settle in before you move something else. So all of a sudden they're realizing that's not an hour that I need to plug in. It's an hour and a half.
Yes.
They need to allocate that extra buffer on the sides. And otherwise it throws everything off with everything stacking up like that.
Right. What challenges tend to arise along the way?
Well, I think that when people have self-doubt, it takes a while for them to believe that they can do this. So what I try to tell people is that, when they're thinking about coaching, it's an investment in time, and that it takes a win to then get another win, and to kind of, it adds up on top of each other until they start experiencing that self-confidence that they could do this, and to start putting away that self-negative talk. So I think, so to answer that question, it's a lot of people think that, they could do this in a fast way, or that they can't do it at all. So, we chip away at that too, if that's a challenge that's coming up. And another big challenge is who's in their life. Are they supporting them with this as well? We don't want anybody sabotaging it when they're trying to do the hard work.
Right. What can someone do to be supportive?
Well, a really important thing is to learn about ADHD, and to learn as much as you can about how it affects the person and the home and the family, and to be able to, to understand how to support them better. That maybe you need to both sit down and divvy up things that are inherently strengths for one and the strengths for the other, and not expect that this person is going to be an expert at the things that you are, as a spouse. Understanding it's not their fault. They're not trying to do this. Most people with ADHD are working twice or three times as hard to just be on par with the neurotypical people in their lives, and learn how to communicate with each other.
Right. Do you ever have opportunity to help the family members understand and answer their questions, provide resources?
I do. I'm not really a couples coach, but there have been occasions where I've had the couples on together or I've spoken to the spouse separately. I find the ones that are easiest to work with this and to support their spouse are the ones that are most open. If they're at a point in their marriage, let's say if it's a couple, and that one of them is just so angry with the ADHD spouse and or they're just they're fed up and so forth, they need to get some proper counseling in order to be able to get to the point where they can find out more. So I think that's important. But for those who are really open to helping, whether it's the children, the spouse, the parent, whatever, if they're willing to just see things in a little bit different way and to be open to learning about it, I think that's really the crux of it because then you can, the ADHD client can go and start to advocate. And there was a great formula that I had heard once about advocating. It's like you have to educate and then make a request. So let's say if an adult needs more time to take care of something, let's say I find it hard to process all this quickly. I need to take my time and or I can't do three things at once. If you tell me I need to actually have them written out on a list, and that would help me to be able to take care of the things you want me to do.
Excellent. Are there other challenges that arise along the way, I guess on the practical or technical side?
Well, I would say that there's always different challenges that come up.
Right.
So, and I think most of my clients have several executive functions that they're dealing with at the same time.
Sure.
So they might be having some trouble with self-regulation and impulsivity at the same time that they're having focusing and time management challenges. So what thing we might try to do with the self-regulation is have them learn how to pause in the moment, which is really, really crucial. That way they can not answer right away yes to something or say no to something. They don't start to buy something that they don't need. They stop before they make a quick decision about something. So that is one example of, like what might need to happen before they start to take on more work at work, which leads to some time management challenges. So there are a number of things that might be a focus at the same time, but each session we might kind of, look and dabble in it a little bit at a time.
All right, so if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying sometimes the different executive function challenges sort of sabotage each other, so that what you're trying to improve on one, the other one's getting in the way. So you need to address the one that's more that's a bigger cause of the other one, or more of a root problem.
Yeah, and it can vary in each session.
Right.
So let's say the client has learned how to estimate better the time. We've looked at their anchors and we see, what would really be important to put in their day. They see now that they've got a block of time to take care of something, but they are getting distracted because people coming in and out of the office and so forth. So in that case, it might be, like, well, how can you advocate for yourself that you need this time to just dig in? Because every time you lift that crock pot lid off the crock pot, it sets back the cooking, like when you're trying to focus on something. So, like that might show up right then, or it might be that they're hyper focusing on something. So each time that we're working within something else that they've worked on, something else might pop up. And so we address it because I'm always looking to see, what's taking up their headspace, what's important in that session, and helping them to make sure that we get to some type of outcome that'll help them again move forward a little bit.
You mentioned getting them to pause before that impulse buy. What's the secret? How do you get them to do that?
Well, first it's awareness. That might be the thing that they have to work on during the week is like when they are starting to feel, and sometimes we talk about where it happens in their body, like they start to feel the impulse. It could be they start to feel like tension in their neck area, or they start to feel something. It's like learning how to just at least be self-aware because many people are not self-aware in their body at all, like where they're holding it. It could be a matter of like just remembering to just count to 5, or I teach them a little bit of breath work to help them just kind of slow things down a little bit with a bigger exhale versus a smaller inhale. So there's different ways depending on the person.
Okay. And do you need to build into the system ways to remember to do that? Because I feel like otherwise it's likely to the idea is likely to slip away.
Yeah, what's interesting though is that if it's really been top of mind for them and something that's really hurting them in some way or challenging them, I find that even if they think about it twice, like 2 times,
Right.
it's starting to work its way in there. And then we talk about it again the following session. So all of a sudden now we're reinforcing what they learned. And then we might weave that through the session and talk about some other ways they can apply it. So the more they talk about it, think about it, feel it, then it starts to kind of really make changes. I mean, there are clients that, obviously that are not going to make as much progress, but I'm very upfront when I start working with somebody that really that hard work takes place in between the sessions. It's not so much that it's hard; it's just that you're trying to undo things that you've talked, said about yourself, or things that are happening from externally, and they most of them just really want to make change. They do.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're giving them a lot of credit for putting in a lot of work,
Yeah. Yep.
which is probably why they do so
Absolutely.
well.
Ah. Yeah. God willing.
What's a book or a resource you recommend besides yourself? A good resource. Huh?
So I have a physical resource that I use a lot. It's called a time timer.
Oh,
This
sure. Okay.
is, yeah, the time timer. For your audience, it's an app. It's like a timer you can carry around with you. There's a wall version. You can get it as a watch. What it is it's a physical way of seeing time pass by. So when I set it for my sessions and it has like red or whatever color, you could see the red closing up. One of the reasons why I really recommend this is because for people who have a lot of this time blindness and really can't feel time so well, when they just see a digital, like it says 10:45, they're seeing one tiny sliver of time. They don't see it in the context. They can't see how long things are taking, how short things are taking, where they are in time. So this, as well as saying, having analog clocks all over the house
Right.
is a big deal. So that's in terms of a resource like that. In terms of uh, a, a website, CHAD is amazing. That's Children and Adults with ADD.
Sure.
And they are phenomenal with all different types of infographics and articles and videos and resources in a directory. That I really recommend. And then the book I mentioned before about with habits, James Clear, Atomic Habits, I think is phenomenal because he tries to show that you can make changes by doing little bits at a time. And then that's why I used the word atomic, but it also means great changes that happen.
Right.
So I would suggest that book as well.
Excellent. Um, what's a message of hope you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, they're not broken. They are whole people who have so much to give, and that they don't have to be like everybody else. Everybody's brain is different. We need people who are big picture thinkers. We need people who are detailed thinkers. And it's just a matter of finding things that fit your life that work for you.
Amazing. Anything else you wanted to mention today?
I'm very happy to be on your show. And I just hope that everybody out there understands that they can make changes in their life. It does not have to be monumental. They can be tiny little changes and they all add up.
Okay, awesome. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can reach me on my website at alifethatfits.com. And that has all the information that you need if you want to give a call, if we could set up a discovery call. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I have a Facebook business page as well.
Okay, excellent. So we'll ask Ellen to put all those in the show notes.
Great.
Thanks so much for coming on today. This was an amazing conversation.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.